I want you to think about the last time you made a budget. Maybe you sat down one Sunday evening, wrote out your income, listed your expenses, divided everything neatly into categories, told yourself this time would be different. And then, 2 or 3 weeks later, it fell apart. Maybe it was an unexpected expense. Maybe a stressful week led to a few unplanned purchases. Maybe you just got tired of tracking every single dollar and quietly stopped. And when it fell apart, what did you tell yourself? I bet you said some version of the same thing most people say. I just don't have enough discipline. I'm bad with money. I know what to do, I just can't make myself do it. Here is what I need you to hear before we go any further. That story you've been telling yourself, that you are the problem, is wrong. Not partially wrong, completely wrong. Your budget didn't fail because you lack discipline. Your budget failed because it was designed to fail. And today I'm going to show you exactly why, using real psychology, real numbers, and a completely different approach to managing money that actually works for real human beings living real lives. By the end of this video, you will never look at budgeting the same way again. And more importantly, you will finally have a system that works. Let's get into it. Let's start by dismantling the biggest lie in personal finance, the idea that budgeting is a discipline problem. Here is why this belief is so dangerous. When you believe the problem is your discipline, you keep trying the same broken system with more willpower. And when it fails again, and it will, you add another layer of shame to your relationship with money. This cycle doesn't build wealth, it builds anxiety. So let's look at what the research actually says about willpower and discipline, because it tells a very different story than the personal finance industry wants you to believe. Psychologists have studied willpower extensively, and one of the most consistent findings is this. Willpower is not a character trait. It is a finite daily resource, like a battery. Every decision you make throughout the day drains that battery slightly. Every moment of resisting temptation, every time you choose the harder option over the easier one, every time you exercise self-control in any area of your life. By the end of a long workday, a stressful meeting, a difficult commute, a challenging interaction, your willpower battery is significantly depleted. And that is exactly the moment most budgets ask you to exercise maximum financial restraint. You're tired, you're stressed, your decision-making capacity is at its lowest point of the day, and your budget is sitting there saying, "No, you can't have that. No, that's not in the plan. No, you've already spent your food budget for the week." Is it any wonder most people eventually give in? This is not weakness, this is biology. And any budget system that relies on you having unlimited willpower at the end of a hard day is a budget system that is going to fail. Not sometimes, eventually, every time. The solution isn't more discipline. The solution is a system that doesn't require discipline to maintain. But before we get there, we need to understand the second reason budgets fail, and this one is even more powerful than willpower depletion. Here is the question most budget advice never asks. Why do people overspend in the first place? Not the surface answer, the real answer. Because if we understand why people spend money beyond their budget, we can actually design a system that addresses it, instead of just telling people to stop. The research on spending behavior reveals something that most people have never been told. Spending is not primarily a financial decision. It is primarily an emotional one. Studies in consumer psychology show consistently that the majority of unplanned purchases are triggered not by need, but by emotional state. Stress, boredom, loneliness, anxiety, frustration, celebration, reward seeking after a hard day. Think about your own spending patterns for a moment. When do you tend to overspend? Is it after a particularly difficult day at work? Is it when you're scrolling your phone late at night and an ad catches your attention? Is it when you're with certain people who spend freely and you don't want to feel left behind? Is it when you feel like you've been restricting yourself for a while and you feel like you deserve a treat? All of those are emotional triggers, not financial ones. And here's the critical insight that most budgets completely ignore. A budget that simply says no to spending without providing any alternative for the emotional need that spending was meeting is not a complete system. It is half a system. You cannot simply remove a behavior that is meeting a psychological need without replacing it with something else. Human beings don't work that way. The need doesn't disappear just because the budget says no. This is why strict, restrictive budgets fail so consistently. They address the symptom, the spending, without addressing the cause, the emotional trigger driving the spending. The person who stress shops after a hard day doesn't need a tighter budget. They need a healthier stress response that doesn't cost money. The person who overspends socially doesn't need more willpower. They need clarity on their values and confidence in their financial identity. The person who treats themselves after a week of restriction doesn't need more discipline. They need a budget that builds in guilt-free spending from the beginning, so restriction never builds to the breaking point. We'll come back to exactly how to do this, but first, there is a third reason budgets fail that almost nobody talks about. Even if you had unlimited willpower, even if you had complete control over your emotional spending triggers, most budget systems would still fail you, because most budget systems are fundamentally badly designed. Let me show you what I mean. The most common budget advice is the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of your income toward needs, 30% toward wants, 20% toward savings and debt. Sounds clean. Sounds logical. Now let's apply it to reality. If you take home $3,500 per month, your needs budget is $1,750. But the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in many cities exceeds $1,400 to $1,600 per month alone. Before you've paid utilities, groceries, transportation, or insurance, your needs budget is already gone, or over. The 50-30-20 rule was designed for a cost of living reality that no longer exists in most major cities. It is a framework built for a different era, being applied to people living in a completely different economic reality. When someone tries to follow this rule and consistently cannot, they don't conclude that the rule is outdated. They conclude that they are failing. That is a design failure, not a personal failure. The second design problem is how most budgets handle irregular expenses. Most people budget for their regular monthly expenses, rent, utilities, subscriptions, groceries. But life is not made of regular monthly expenses. Car repairs happen. Medical bills arrive. School expenses appear. Family emergencies occur. Seasonal expenses, back to school, holidays, birthdays, come around every year like clockwork. And every single time one of these irregular expenses arrives, the budget collapses. Not because the person failed, but because the budget never accounted for the completely predictable reality that life is irregular. The third design problem is that most budgets are static in a dynamic life. They are built in one sitting, on one day, based on one snapshot of your current income and expenses. But your life doesn't stay still. Income varies, expenses shift, circumstances change. And a static budget built for last month's reality often doesn't fit this month's at all. So let's now talk about what actually works, because everything we've covered so far is groundwork for the real solution. The system I'm going to share with you is built on a completely different philosophy than traditional budgeting. Traditional budgeting says, restrict first, save what's left. The Freedom First system says, allocate first, spend the rest freely. Here's how it works, and it has 4 components. Company 1, pay yourself first, automatically. The moment your paycheck arrives, before you pay a single bill, before you buy a single thing, a predetermined amount moves automatically into your savings and investment accounts. Not manually, automatically. You set this up once, it runs in the background of your life. You never have to make the decision again, which means you never have to use willpower to make it happen. This single change removes the biggest point of failure in traditional budgeting, the moment at the end of the month when you try to save whatever is left. Because with most budgets, nothing is left. Pay yourself first, automate it, then live on what remains. Compute 2, fixed expenses on autopay. Every predictable recurring expense, rent, utilities, insurance, subscriptions, minimum debt payments goes on auto-pay. These are not negotiable expenses. They don't require a decision every month. So remove the decision entirely. Automate them and forget them. This dramatically reduces your daily financial decision load, which protects the willpower battery we talked about earlier for the decisions that actually matter. Command 3. The Freedom Fund. After your savings are automated and your fixed expenses are handled, what remains is your Freedom Fund. This is the money you are completely free to spend however you choose. No categories, no tracking every coffee, no guilt about enjoying your money. The Freedom Fund works because it removes the psychological burden of constant financial restriction. You know your savings are happening. You know your bills are paid. Everything that remains is genuinely yours to use as you see fit. This is the component that eliminates the deprivation to breaking point cycle that destroys most budgets. When you know you have guilt-free money available, the emotional urgency of unplanned spending drops dramatically. Because you're not restricting yourself. You're just spending within a container that you control. Component 4. The Irregular Expense Fund. Every month, alongside your savings automation, a small fixed amount moves into a separate account specifically for irregular but predictable expenses. Car maintenance, medical copays, annual subscriptions, seasonal expenses, birthday gifts, holiday spending. These things happen every year. They are not surprises, even if the timing varies. By setting aside even $100 to $200 per month into this dedicated fund, when these expenses arrive, they are already covered. The budget doesn't collapse. The savings don't get raided. The Freedom Fund doesn't disappear. The expense simply gets paid from the fund that was built for exactly this purpose. These 4 components together create a system that works not because it demands perfect behavior, but because it is designed around real human psychology and real-life unpredictability. Let's make this completely concrete with real numbers. We'll use 3 different income levels so you can find the one closest to your situation. Example 1. Take home $2,800 per month. Automated savings, 10%. $280. Fixed expenses, rent, bills, $1,600. Irregular expense fund, $100. Freedom fund, $820. That $820 is yours, completely, every month. No tracking, no guilt. Just spend it however serves you best. Example 2. Take home $4,200 per month. Automated savings, 15%. $630. Fixed expenses, $2,100. Irregular expense fund, $150. Freedom fund, $1,320. $1,320 of completely guilt-free monthly spending, while $630 builds your future every single month without you having to think about it. Example 3. Take home $6,000 per month. Automated savings, 20%. $1,200. Fixed expenses, $2,800. Irregular expense fund, $200. Freedom fund, $1,800. $1,800 per month to live your life freely, while $1,200 builds toward your financial future automatically. Now notice something important across all 3 examples. The savings happen first. The bills are automated. The irregular fund protects the system from real-life unpredictability. And a meaningful amount of money remains for genuine enjoyment. No deprivation. No shame. No willpower required to maintain it month after month. This is what a budget that actually works looks like for real people living real lives. Now let's address the emotional component we identified earlier. Because even with the Freedom First system in place, if you have strong emotional spending triggers, understanding them makes this system work even more powerfully. Here are the 4 most common emotional spending triggers and a specific strategy for each one. Trigger 1. Stress spending. You spend money to relieve stress after a difficult day or situation. The strategy. Build a free or low-cost stress relief toolkit before the urge hits. A walk, a workout, a specific playlist, a conversation with someone you trust, a hot meal at home, a bath, a book. These alternatives don't require eliminating the desire for relief. They redirect it towards something that costs nothing and doesn't compromise your financial position. Trigger 2. Boredom spending. You spend money because you have nothing else engaging to do. Scrolling leads to browsing, which leads to buying. The strategy: identify your boredom spending environment and disrupt it at the source. Delete shopping apps from your phone. Unsubscribe from retail email lists. Replace scrolling time with a specific, engaging alternative, a hobby, a project, a show you're genuinely invested in. Most boredom spending disappears when the frictionless path to it is removed. Trigger 3. Social spending. You overspend in social situations because you don't want to feel left behind or appear financially restricted. The strategy: build a clear personal social spending limit in advance and make peace with it before the situation arises. I'm spending X dollars tonight and I'm completely comfortable with that. Set internally, firmly, before you arrive. Spending decisions made in advance, in a calm state, are dramatically more effective than spending decisions made in the moment under social pressure. Trigger 4. Reward spending. You spend money as a reward for a hard week, a completed goal, or a period of financial restriction. The strategy: build the reward into the Freedom Fund by design. Plan a specific, meaningful treat, a meal out, an experience, something you genuinely value at regular intervals, quarterly, monthly, whatever fits your financial position. When rewards are planned and funded, the impulsive reward spending that breaks budgets becomes unnecessary. The need is already being met, intentionally and without guilt. Everything we've covered today is practical, real numbers, real systems, real strategies. But I want to leave you with the mindset shift that ties all of it together. Because the deepest reason most budgets fail is not willpower. It's not even design. It's identity. Most people approach budgeting from the outside in. They try to change their behavior first, hoping that eventually their identity as someone who is good with money will follow. But behavior change that isn't rooted in identity almost never sticks. Because the moment the motivation fades, which it always does, the behavior reverts to whatever feels natural, whatever feels like you. The shift that makes everything else permanent is this: stop trying to act like someone who is good with money. Start deciding that you are someone who is good with money. Not someday, not when the accounts look better, not when the debt is gone. Now. Because here is the truth about identity and financial behavior. The person who identifies as someone who is good with money doesn't need to fight themselves every month to save. Saving feels natural because it's what people like them do. The person who identifies as financially responsible doesn't need external motivation to avoid impulse purchases. Avoiding them feels consistent with who they are. The person who sees themselves as a wealth builder doesn't experience their automated investment as a sacrifice. It feels like an expression of their values. This is not positive thinking for its own sake. This is understanding how human behavior actually works. We act in alignment with our identity far more consistently than we act in alignment with our intentions. So the decision I want you to make today, before you change a single number in your budget, is this: decide who you are. I am someone who manages money with intention. I am someone who builds wealth consistently. I am someone whose financial system works because I built it to work for me, not against me. From that identity, everything else follows naturally. Let's bring everything together. The real reason your budget never worked had nothing to do with your discipline. It failed because 1. It relied on willpower that depletes throughout the day. 2. It ignored the emotional triggers driving your spending behavior. 3. It was badly designed for real life, built around outdated frameworks, ignoring irregular expenses, and unable to adapt to a dynamic financial reality. The Freedom First system works because it removes willpower from the equation, addresses the psychology of spending, and is built for the actual unpredictability of real life. 4 components, applied consistently. 1. Automate your savings first. 2. Put fixed expenses on autopay. 3. Spend your freedom fund freely and without guilt. 4. Build an irregular expense fund that protects the entire system. And underneath all of it, the identity shift. You are not someone who is bad with money. You are someone who was given a broken system and told the problem was you. Today, that changes. Build the system. Trust the system. Give it 3 months before you judge it. I promise you, you will never go back to traditional budgeting again. If this video finally explains something you have been struggling with for years, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Let's build.